For making a move, I'll invite Dean to come up, and we'll just firstly of all, Dean, whereabouts are you from, mate?
I hail from Sydney, actually. Well, originally from Hobart, Tasmania, which most Tasmanians are quite proud to say. We're a bit of a patriotic bunch down there. But finished schooling down there and moved to the mainland, as we call it. Went to Avondale University and am based in Sydney now, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And a family?
Yeah, I have a family. We kind of started a bit late in life, and so I have an 11-year-old son and a wife who wanted to come, but unfortunately school's finishing up today, so they had a few other things going on.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, if you can all just continue to make your way toward the front, that'd be good. And Dean, I might just open with a word of prayer this morning, and then I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much.
Sounds good. Let's all pray together, shall we? Dear loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the week that's been. We thank you for the words that have been spoken, and we thank you for this opportunity again to gather together as a team, as a tent, to be able to do this final workshop that we have for the week. I thank you for Dean and the gifts and the anointing upon his life, and I pray that you would you would be able to speak through him this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Hey, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dean.
So look, it's obviously Friday morning. And you're never quite sure how many people you get rocking up to these things. But even those of you that are just down there, it'd be really great if we could all kind of be in the first 3 or 4 rows, because it's going to be a highly interactive session here. I'm not here to do all the talking. I'm not the expert. I'm sure we've got plenty of good knowledge in the room. But we're going to have a bit of fun with a couple of activities. There'll be a few videos as well. So just to open up, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a leader and you've assembled a great group of people together. Now, these people are very smart, they're very enthusiastic, and you've got a critical problem that you've got to solve. As the couple of days goes on, you start to get frustrated that this problem is not getting solved. I mean, after all, you've assembled this great group of people, they're smart, we should be able to solve this together. But as you sit back and you look at the dynamics, you start to notice a few things. And there's one person in the group that kind of reigns on everyone's ideas. So let's call him Mr. Critical. You know those sort of people? It's just they always take the glass half empty type of thing, and they're critical. And so what you notice when you're looking at this group of people is that because this person is critical, that sort of people tend to hold back a bit from what they're going to say. You've also got someone in the group that kind of defers their opinion to the smartest person in the group, or who they perceive to be the smartest. And so they kind of don't say much at all. They say, well, no, I kind of agree with him, I'll go with the flow. And so you know those people when you've been in the group, they're kind of there. We have a lot of that in the church. We all sit on committees, because I work at the South Pacific Division, and a lot of those committees we sit on just because of our position. It's not necessarily a knowledge-based group of individuals. It's we're there simply because of the position that we fill, and so you get different levels of motivation and so forth. And then you also notice in this group you've got a bit of a class clown. So this lady sort of drops inappropriate comments and jokes and has a bit of a laugh, and everyone kind of rolls their eyes. Familiar dynamics? So I guess this is an example of negative group dynamics. And when you look at organisations, generally those that are functioning well and getting things done have positive group dynamics, and then you've got the inverse. So when I think about team dynamics, it's really the roles that people assume when they come together and the behaviours that play out that influence the way that they interact. And so today we're going to look at what sort of goes into making up various types of team dynamics. We're also going to look at what you as a person of a team, and also what you as a leader of a team can do to try and create more positive dynamics. That sound okay? Yeah, so I want it to be quite practical. It's Patrick Lencioni. Anyone heard of Patrick Lencioni? He's probably the global guru on teams, and he wrote a book which we'll have a little bit of a look at some of his stuff shortly, called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And Patrick says that teamwork is probably the most important and vital resource that an institution has to achieve its mission. And that's really interesting, teamwork, because when we come together in organisations, we tend to focus on strategy, right? Really important, of course. We need to know where we're going. And of course, we've always got input from the chief financial officers or the accountants, right? So they can make or break ideas very easy. So we focus on finance. We often focus on the product that we're developing. We want to make sure it's good, otherwise it's not going to fly. So we focus on all these things, the marketing, the promotions, but oftentimes we don't focus on teamwork. Now, what is the major reason that people often, leave a job? If you were to have a guess, what's the reason that people leave a job? Sorry? Conflict, yeah. Any other reasons? Sorry, just shout out. Management, yeah. So you see the thread there? Conflict, management. So it's all about people. And if you've ever led a group of people, you can have the greatest strategy, the greatest product, the greatest marketing, but people. It always comes back to people and conflict, doesn't it? So, and that kind of is borne out by some research we've done in leadership at the South Pacific Division. So a few years ago, we put out a survey to 350 leaders across a whole stack of our entities around the division. And we were looking at the support mechanisms that are in place for their leadership, and also looking at areas that are the biggest challenge for them. And one of the main areas that come back was motivating a group of people to achieve our mission. That was the number one challenge, and they said we need some help with this. So to get us started, I'm just going to show you a short video. Some of you might know who this guy is, Phil Jackson, yeah? If you follow basketball, you know who Phil Jackson is. Let's have a look at what he says about teamwork. Probably one of the most successful NBA coaches in history.
Phil Jackson began his career in the late 60s as a role player with the New York Knicks.
Play tight by Jackson. White has the ball stolen by Jackson. Racing ahead of the field. No one near him. He drives and lays it in. Phil Jackson.
A free spirit, Jackson would become the unlikely protege of the great Knicks coach Red Holtzman.
Red never had an assistant coach. He kind of incorporated me into, the team. What'd you see? What do you think we should do? How you see in the game? I would ask him questions about what's he looking for. I found a bond, became kind of like his pet. I learned some basketball. I learned a lot about how to handle people, and I learned a lot from my teammates about how to play together. We really believed, as players with the New York Knicks, that everybody had to be involved. There's the belief that everybody should touch the ball, everybody had to be a part of what we were doing.
The New York Knicks have defeated the Los Angeles Lakers, winning their second championship of all time.
That was a beginning of something that was to lead to this later life.
It's a journey that begins with a single step. It's a 1,000-mile journey. You've got to remember that each game is that step that you take along the way, as is each practice.
It's that law of the jungle poem that Rudyard Kipling wrote. Simply that the strength of the wolf is the pack. Is that we don't stand as individuals in this game. This is a team game. And that the stronger the bond is between players, that's where the strength becomes. And the wolf has to rely on the pack to fulfill what it's going to do. That's really basketball.
The Chicago Bulls NBA championship.
Phil was just a fascinating person who was willing to kind of try anything to motivate the team, to keep us interested. It's been pretty well documented. He would have these meditation sessions.
He has his whole Zen thing that he has a belief in. Once everybody's connected, then the picture is beautiful and the bond is stronger.
Oh my God, that was beautiful.
Although he's won 9 titles as a coach, last year Jackson and the Lakers came up short in the finals, but that disappointing loss only strengthened their resolve.
Last year we lost it, but this year it's our home court right now. This is about us, right?
I think the biggest thing is to always believe in your players.
Focus now. We gotta focus. 1, 2, 3.
It might be demonstrated in a moment when they're not performing well that they are better than that, and they can prove it and they show it by just putting them out there and letting them survive.
Beautiful interior passing. Bryant to Gasol to Odom.
But it's a certain sense of satisfaction in seeing what you've envisioned happen for these young men.
Some people may not understand his methods, but if you've played for him, you understand him completely and you know what he's about. I mean, he's just absolutely brilliant at bringing a group together to accomplish one common goal.
Now, this is the law of the jungle, as old and as true as the sky. And the wolf that keeps it shall prosper. The wolf that doesn't shall die. This law runs forward and back, that the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you that video to start to get your thinking into this space of what it takes to get the best out of a group of disparate individuals to work towards that common goal. Now, I've got a definition up there of teamwork, and sometimes, when we've got more time and more people, I get you to think about a definition for yourself. But I'll just put it up there. And look, there's loads of definitions that you could find for what a team does. What do you think about the one that's up there at the moment? Does that seem to fit okay, or any disagreements there, or any comments? A stable, bonded group of individuals, interdependent in achieving a shared goal. Fair go? Okay. So that's, I guess, more, sorry, I need a bit of water. That's probably more of a traditional definition of a team and more aligned to what you just saw with a basketball team. But what we're noticing more and more these days is this concept of teaming. And I've got a picture there. That's, usually when you're talking about traditional definitions, as we saw there, that involves teams. They come together, they practice, they get to know each other, they work out moves so that they can predict what each other's going. There's a good system that goes into their success. But more and more these days, we're finding this concept. Has anyone heard of teaming? Now, teaming is just a little bit different, because what happens with teaming is it's kind of teamwork on the fly. It's a group of independent individuals, but they're working together across boundaries to achieve a mutual goal. So these people may not be a stable team. They may not actually know each other. They may not fully understand each other's expertise. And so we're talking about theatres or emergency rooms, right? We've got a bunch of different specialists in there. Anaesthetists, we've got doctors, we've got nurses, we've got computer systems or technology specialists that all have to come together and work together on the fly to create that common outcome. Do you remember this picture? Does that ring any bells? From Thailand a few years ago. So that was another really good example of teaming in place. So it was when that group of school kids got stuck in the cave for however long it was. There was an immediate serious problem that required teaming on the fly. So you had politicians getting involved, you had police, you had divers, you had engineers, medical people. They all had to come together and on the fly solve this problem. And if you think about a lot of the problems that we've got going on today, this is more of the model. It's in it together. We can't solve it alone. We call these wicked problems, if you like. We're faced with wicked problems, not in a spiritual sense, but we call them wicked because they almost look unsolvable. There are no immediate answers. We can't break them down. We can't logically work our way through them. Can anyone think of a wicked problem, a recent wicked problem that we've had that looks like that? Sorry? Floods? Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of COVID, right? So what a wicked problem that is. And we can see kind of going on the fly. Yes. Yeah. 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 There's no easy fix, and it requires people coming together, but not necessarily a stable bonded team. And this is what Paul Polman says. He's the CEO of Unilever. Many of you have probably heard of that, one of the world's biggest organisations. He says the issues we're facing today are so challenging that we actually can't do it alone. So there's a certain humility and a recognition that we need to invite other people in. When you look at any issues such as food or water scarcity, it's very clear that no individual, institution, government or company can provide this solution. Leading people these days is complex. And part of that is not only because of the issues we've got, but because people are complex. You and I are complex. And so the job of a leader is essentially to take all this complexity around us as humans and to try and get us aligned to achieve this problem. Keeping in mind that there are always going to be group dynamics, right? So how do we create those positive dynamics versus the negative dynamics? So we're going to have a little bit of fun now, and I counted about, maybe 35 people here. I'm going to get you to get into groups of 5. Can you do that really quickly? And we've got a little activity for you. So as best as you can, groups of 5, not too much more than that. So people up the back, just come down the front, find a group. Would you mind just handing out one of these to each person? Okay, so we're going to have a look at a story. This story has a number of characters, and it's called Alice and Sinbad. You have a scenario. I'll put up that scenario on the slide in a moment, but I'll also bring you a piece of paper. You'll get one of your own. Your job is to read through this short scenario, and then you have to rate the characters from sort of a moral standpoint, sort of the most moral to the least moral. There's 5 characters, all right? Now I'm going to give you a few minutes to read it through. The first thing you are to do, and if you don't have a pen, you can just do it on your phone, because you may not have bought a pen. First thing is to rate it for yourself. So I don't want you to talk to anyone around it. You just rate the characters from sort of the most moral to the least moral. And then when you've done that, I'm going to give you 5 minutes as a group to come up with the top 5. Does that make sense? And then I'm going to ask someone from each of the group to tell me what your group top 5 was. So first task, rate the characters 1 to 5 according to your own opinion. And the second exercise, take 5 minutes as a group to discuss and rate the characters. Does that make sense? All right, I'll put it up on here so you can see the scenario as well. So I'll just leave you to it. But we don't have loads of time, so you'll have to try and come up with a group decision pretty quick. All right, I hope you've had a chance to read it now, and you should just be working on ranking it, each individual yourself, 1 to 5, 1 being the one that I would rate as the most morally favourable, and number 5 being the worst of those individuals. All right, hopefully you've done your own now. And the task now is, as a group, to come up with a top 5 that you're all comfortable with, that represents, the collective of your group. Give you about 5 minutes. No, you can't have 2 of the same number. It has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you can't rank them the same. All right, we've got about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. All right, we're about to wrap it up. So even if you can't get group consensus, put down those rankings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we're going to wrap it up because I know it's not an easy exercise and we could keep going and going, but I hope you've had a chance to do your best in numbering them. Now, first question is, which group or how many of you had a different group consensus to your own personal consensus? Yeah, some of you. Okay. Was there anyone whose rankings were exactly the same for the group as they were when they did it personally? Rushing to get it done. Yeah, look, I would agree. Needs more time. All right. How did you find the exercise generally? Anyone like to comment? Make a comment. What was the exercise like? Challenging. Why was it challenging?
Challenging from time and from different opinions.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. What, sorry? Intriguing. Okay. Why was it intriguing? Okay. Intriguing, challenging. Any other reflections? Okay. In what way? Okay. Yeah, good point. We don't necessarily know the background of everyone.
I think in any group, everybody in that group as an individual has their own idea of what's a worse thing than the other. Everybody's got their own take on that and different perspective. So it's a bit like, I guess, a jury, and you have to come to a consensus and see why. We don't know all the other finer details, but people reacted in a terrible way. Very murky.
Yeah, and I think as well, we're bringing the way that we see situations, our own subjective things that we kind of add into it that may not necessarily actually be in the story. We're kind of subconsciously bringing into the story in our views on things.
Can I just ask about group dynamics? All right, you're probably too invested in solving the problem, but was there any group dynamics that anyone was aware of? Was there anyone that was speaking a little bit more than someone else in the group that had more to say? Was there anyone in the group, maybe it was yourself, that was sort of just holding back a little bit and allowing the decision to be made by other members in the group? You don't have to admit to it. I'm just saying, were there any observations around that? Because typically what happens is when this sort of thing comes together, group dynamics start to formulate. So I'm sure that they were starting to happen. All right, so let's see where you landed with that exercise. Number 5, hands up if there's anyone that thought Alice was the worst person in that story. All right, now there's a lot, so I'm gonna ask why. Who'd like to give a quick account of why you ranked Alice the worst? Yeah, okay, thanks.
She committed adultery.
She committed adultery. Okay. All right. Well, that's fair. That's obviously, if that were the case, would we all agree? Probably not ideal. All right. Anyone else on why you rated Alice the worst? For those of you that did.
She was, in some sense, like her true character showed eventually, like what was really underneath. Yeah. Okay then. So her true character showed in the end. Was that because of the little smile that she gave? Okay. Did anyone else have something different to Alice as the worst? Yes, just up here, Galty.
Yeah, we excuse me. We put Sinbad down as the worst.
Sinbad, Galty,
Yeah.
Galty's in agreement there.
Yeah, I
tell
think
us why.
Oh, he's a self-serving two-timer, that guy. He wanted to get what he wanted, no matter how it happened.
So where did Alice rank for your group?
She was
next. So she was 4.
Yeah.
All right. Who's the best person in the story? Do we have a consistent number 1? Slug. Okay. Yes, Slug. Is that fair? Henry. Okay.
Yeah,
why Henry? Tell us why Henry.
Why Henry? Oh, I'd have to read this. What did he do? He set his boundaries. I can't do it, and that was it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we said, because, he didn't enter into anything that he couldn't deal with.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else that had something different from Henry as number 1? Or, did you have a comment on Henry?
Oh, yeah, you got a comment on Henry?
I don't.
Oh, okay, no comment on Henry. Henry didn't help.
Henry didn't help.
Nah.
So was that a good thing or not so good?
Well, at least Slug helped. Yeah,
Okay, so Slug's number one.
Yeah, Slug's number one.
Okay. Did anyone else have Slug as number one? What about David? What do we all think of David? What do you think of him? Where did he rank? He was number one. He was the best bloke.
Oh, no.
No. He was number two. All right. So, yeah, I think we're all agreed on number 4 and number 5, and possibly being Alice and who else was it? Sinbad. And then probably number 1 and 2 were similar as well.
So where did Slug rate? I haven't heard Slug mentioned apart from
Slug.
number 1.
3. He was kind of right in the middle. All right, let me read something to you. This might help to add a bit more context to the story. So, David was actually Alice's dad. Henry was Alex's brother. Sinbad was Alex's husband. And Slug is the son of David. So let me read the story quickly, slotting those roles into it. Alice loved her dad very much, but he lived on an island across a shark-infested channel. Alice wanted to see him. She walked along the beach and asked her brother if he'd take her across the shark-infested channel to see her dad. Her brother said, "I've got my own troubles and I can't help you." So she walked along the beach and asked her husband if he'd help her. Sinbad looked at her and said, "I'll take you across if you'll sleep with me first tonight." Alice said, "Okay." The next morning, her husband took her across to see her dad. Alice ran up the beach and after a loving welcome told her dad what had happened. Her dad threw her aside. A young man who was David's son, or Alice's brother, who had seen and heard all, was incensed and ran down the hill and punched the dad. The dad fell and rolled into the shark-infested water and was eaten, and Alice was seen with a half smile on her face. Does that change the story? It completely does, doesn't it? Alice is still bad, okay. Well, yeah, that's right. But it's really interesting. For me, that turned the story up on its head. Suddenly it took the adultery out of it, right? And really, really interesting exercise, I think, which brings out a point I want to make, and it's a challenge for leaders. And it's this, on the slide. Each of us has a mindset that we have developed over time that we bring to situations and we bring to groups. That mindset is formulated by lots and lots of different things. It's formulated by your personality. It's formulated by your gender. It might be the upbringing that you've had, what your parents told you. It might be life experiences that you've had. So all these complex pieces that go into formulating our mindset. And our mindset reflects our worldview. So our worldview might be the opinion that we have on the ordination of women, or it might be on climate change, or it might be on whether vaccinations are good or they're not so good. The other thing that we all have as individuals is a set of cognitive biases. And there's loads and loads of different biases that we have. Some of you might have heard of the confirmation bias. Have you heard of that one? A confirmation bias is something that is innate to us, and it's where, when we hold an opinion, we will seek out evidence to support our opinion, often at the expense of getting all the facts. And we find this particularly in religion. So if you hold a point of view, you will go and you will seek out all the Bible texts and all the written content in various books to support your position. If you're a Donald Trump supporter, you will watch Fox News and Sky News. And you probably won't watch CNN or that. So confirmation bias is alive and real for all of us. It's just a thing. We also have primacy recency bias, which is a tendency to remember whatever comes first in a list of things or last. And so this is a thing. When you've got a job interview, if you know there are 4 or 5 candidates, you want to do everything you can to be either 1 or 5, because that's just a bias that we have. We remember whatever more is first or is last. We also have a first impressions bias, right? We sum people up very quickly, and we make decisions about what sort of person we think they are by how they're standing or what colour their hair is, their tone of voice. We also have a bias towards people that think like us. So we gravitate to people that we can have good conversations with. The other one that we have that influences our mindset is schema. And these are mental representations that we construct in our minds to make sense of the world, okay? And they can serve us very well. They kind of ground us. As I said, they help us make sense. But they can also be a bit of a problem because a phobia is often the result of a set of schema that's not necessarily based in rationality, right? So if a dog bit you when you were 5 years old and you're 25 years old and you're walking along a fence and you hear a dog bark and he kind of runs along the fence with you, suddenly you find yourself going to panic mode and all those feelings come back, and it's a phobia. I don't want to be near any dogs. Now, it's not rational, but it's an example of schema that we've constructed that helps us to make sense of the world and know what to do with situations. Do I run? Do I stay? What do I do? This is the challenge for leaders, right? What you just saw in that exercise, bringing a disparate group of people that have a set of aspirations and biases and a set of schema together to try and unite them and solve a problem. Okay. Let's move on. Let's start to get into how we can actually start to unite some of these disparate individuals. So I want you to briefly think, and if we had more time again and a whiteboard, I'd probably write some of this up, but just briefly reflect on an experience that you've had where you were working in an environment or you were part of a group or team that you really enjoyed being part of. What was going on in that team? What were some of the traits or characteristics of the groups of that, or the members of that team? What was going on in the environment? What was the leader like that was running the team you were part of? What were some of the things that you remember that made it joyous? Take a moment to reflect on that, just 30 seconds, and then I'll ask for a quick bit of feedback. Or we can start right away.
They made you think that they were listening to what you were proposing?
So they listened. Yeah, they valued or gave time for your opinion. Okay. Anything else in a team that you enjoyed being part of?
It was like upbeat and fun, not down. Even though it could be a down situation, it was still a positive than a negative.
And what made it positive? What were some of the things going on to make it positive?
The attitude of the leader. So, positivity in the team, even though it could be hard work or whatever needed, it was still a positive from the leader.
So it was a mindset of positivity, yeah? Yeah, awesome. Anyone got a mic at the moment? We'll share it.
That it was accepting. So the group as a team worked in a way that you bounced ideas. You didn't have to have thought it through, but you brainstormed and everybody was a part of it and everybody was accepted and you built on each other's ideas, and the leader made sure everybody was at the same level and everybody was accepted, heard, listened, and you felt as though the team developed that and you were a part working together.
So everyone felt as though they had a part in the team, they were listened to. Great. Any other reflections, a team or environment that you worked in that you really enjoyed? What was going on? Yeah.
One where the outcome actually met with your own ideals and would be of benefit to others.
So I'm hearing values kind of, you're talking about ideals, so it was in alignment with your own personal values. Yeah. Isn't it great where you're working in an organisation or with a group where your personal values align with the collective group values or the organisational values? really important. We don't talk enough about values in the workplace. Well, let's flip then on its head your experience in an environment where you really didn't like. What was going on then that made that difficult? What was the leader like? What was going on in the team? What were some of the dynamics taking place there? Any quick reflections on that one?
People complaining about each other just consistently.
Yeah, so the leaders tolerated, just I guess that lack of uniformity and you're talking about gossip and that sort of stuff and.
Just gossip and not supportive of each other. It's just a constant environment of whinging and yeah.
Ask a question? How, because it's another box there, feelings. How did that make you feel?
To be honest, I probably just got used to it in my job, but yeah, I wanted to separate myself from that. I would always try and incorporate a positive side of things, but I wasn't necessarily always the team leader, but eventually I would just sort of separate myself a bit and let them sort it out themselves if I wasn't the team leader, but probably not the right thing to do. But
Well, it sounds like you weren't fully engaged. So over time, as that kept happening, you sort of disengaged yourself from that group, yeah.
Yeah, when the leader lacked vision, the group wanted to go in a certain direction, but the leader wanted to go in a totally different direction and just didn't have the vision, and it became an us and them type of thing unwittingly.
When the leader is in competition with the team, so the leader is actually competing. No, don't anybody take my position because I'm the guru here. And so you can't, as a leader, you can't build up your team if you're actually in competition with them.
Can I go?
I'm a leader that's...
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, a leader that uses... that, where you can see exclusivity happening and members, not all members of the group are being included, and the feeling or impact is that some in the group are going to withdraw, whereas others are going to dominate.
Yeah, great. So power dynamics as well.
I think when the focus is on the team serving the leader rather than the leader serving the team.
Yeah, great insight. The reason that we talk about feelings, by the way, is that feelings trump thoughts most of the time, right? In actual fact, when we go into panic mode, the science tells us that our thoughts just become completely erratic. And when we're in that flight response, we're almost, this is hard to believe, but the neuroscience tells us that we're almost in a state of drunkenness. Do you know when you're really panicking and or when you're really angry and upset and you just can't get your thoughts together or things come out on the spur of the moment? Feelings are really important. There was a really good quote from a lady called Maya Angelou, who was an American poet up until recently, and she said, people will forget what you do, they'll forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so the feelings are really important, and it's the feelings of frustration and non-inclusion, and that will generally, dictate what action we take. We might just say, I've had enough of this, I'm leaving, or this group's too hard, or this team's toxic, I don't want a part of this anymore, and we withdraw. So thanks for sharing that. I just wanted to start to set the scene, and a lot of what you're feeding back to me gives us an insight into the types of things that we need to make sure that we're across if we're leading a group. What are barriers to a team performing well? Well, I think we've kind of covered that already in that last question. There's a couple of things that immediately stand out, and you touched on this. It's hard to learn if you already know. So often leaders, somebody mentioned it up there, a leader that seems superior to the group, and You've all been around people that are know-it-alls and they can't be told. You know, their opinion's set, their confirmation bias is in full throttle, and they can't be told. So this spirit of humbleness as a leader, I think, where the leader is serving the team, not the other way around, is an important one to consider. The other one that our society kind of sets up is this competition. So I once saw this Harvard Law School professor sitting in front of his first year students. There was about 300 of them, and he said, by the time we come to the end of this first year, only 50% of you will be here, right? That's how he opened it up. So immediately it sets up this competitive mindset in the group. For me to succeed, I have to beat you. But it really creates friction and issues in team dynamics. Now, just a quick aside here, because when we're in a team, and if I were to ask you what's going on and what's the issues, we tend to have this bias towards going, well, that's what they're doing, or it's their fault, and if only my leader would do this. But what I want you to consider for a moment is turning the mirror up to yourself and just thinking, and you don't have to share this with us, but perhaps just talk in pairs for a moment, a couple of minutes. When my team is not united, how might the way I think or behave contribute to that? It's a really interesting question, because it's like a marriage. If there's dynamics in a marriage that are unhealthy, we kind of go towards the, well, if only they'd do this, then I'd feel happier, right? But as you know, it takes two. So what might your part, what awareness do you have inside yourself that you've garnered over time? Let's call them blind spots, places you go to when you get stressed. When your team is not united or seems a bit dysfunctional, the dynamics are not great, what part might you have in that? Just take a minute to discuss, if you're comfortable, with someone next to you, and we'll come back in a second. Okay, I think I can see some good discussion going on, but in the time limits we've got, we'll keep it moving. We've got about 10 more minutes. Are you okay with that? Which will take us probably five or 7 minutes over time. Everyone comfortable with just going 5-7 minutes over time? Yeah, because I want to just. Okay. I mean, this is a topic that there's just so much packed into it, so to try and work out what we do in an hour and something you can take away is a challenge in itself. Would anyone like to share with the group an insight that you personally have? And there's no pressure here, because I know this is kind of quite personal stuff when we're thinking about probably our part in creating a conflict or an unhealthy dynamic. Would anyone like to share, though, an insight that you've gained?
I don't mind sharing, but I get really frustrated, and I know that's my part that I play in an unhappy team, that it's like you've got a list of rules, why don't you follow them? I can't understand it, that, you know, if that's what you're asked to do, why can't you do it? And then we can all have a happy team because everything's going to flow properly.
So are you the sort of person that likes rules and procedures generally in life, or is that more just in that context?
I don't mind rules and procedures, but if there are rules and procedures, then I don't understand why they don't get followed. If they're simple rules and procedures, they're not going to hurt anybody, they're for the best of the company, why can't they get followed?
It almost sounds like a little bit of a sense of justice coming through, like if we've created these rules, then they're there for a reason and they need to be kept. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Great insight. I mean, the other question is, when you get frustrated, what behaviours generally happen? How do you manage that frustration? You'll get cranky. And what does that cranky look like? What might you do in that moment of crankiness that might be unhelpful?
I probably get too assertive. Yeah, I will be, well, why can't we do it like this? This needs to happen. You know, it's obvious black and white, so the assertiveness will come out.
So your voice gets stronger. Okay, I need to be heard here. Right, Phil.
I've noticed with different leaders and even in my own doings that when things get a bit tight or a bit heated, it's far better to respond than to react. And they both are bouncing back to the same issue, but when you respond to something, it can be very positive, but can still be listening to what's happening. But when you react, you're sort of dropping your guard, and people are viewing you differently if you were the leader. And it's just saying, right, it's very reactive here, so they sort of go back in their shell. So responding is far more powerful than reacting.
Any other reflections before we move on? I don't kind of want to... what's your name? I don't want Claire to be the only one that's willing to be vulnerable here and share with the group. But I really appreciate it, Claire. And I'm sure that as you're saying that, there's other people going, that's me a bit too. I mean, we all play a part.
Over here, Dean.
I can tend to be a bit arrogant and believe I'm right at the expense of others. So I don't tend to listen to their opinions, or if I do, I don't actually take it in when I should.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. What a great personal insight.
I'm a little bit the same. I have very strong beliefs, and so when the group and when things aren't falling, like, no, this is actually not philosophical. Like, if you have a strong opinion, strong personality, we know what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going on a tangent way over here.
Yeah.
No, that's not right. Bring it back in. And I tend to have very strong opinions.
Right. And I guess as those feelings and those frustrations start to bubble away, those opinions and that voice becomes greater, a little bit like Claire. Thank you for sharing. We've got one more, yeah.
I tend to be the clown of the group.
The clown?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew we had to have one in here.
Only when the group gets to a certain point where it gets too stressful, then
Right.
yeah.
So it's a bit of an is it as an icebreaker and just sort of diffuse the moment sometimes?
Diffuse the moment and get with the job.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, that humour can be a great icebreaker, can't it? You know, you're sort of sitting there arguing back and forth and you just look at each other and go, oh, what are we doing? And have a bit of a laugh about it sometimes. Yes.
I tend to be the person to get everybody back on track because I can't stand it when they're going off with all of these other things, off into airy fairy land and into all this criticism and stuff, and it's just getting us nowhere. And I tend to be the one that goes, you know what, we're so far out there, can we get back to this? And people don't like that because they're loving what they're doing. Yeah. And I probably used to be like that myself. So over the time, I've learnt to listen more, speak less, and ensure that everybody's had their say before you bring them back to that point, because otherwise it's never going to get back. They'll keep on going.
Letting everyone have their say, and that was a point that came out before in that environment that we enjoy working in, don't we? I once heard this, or saw this image. We have two ears and one mouth. Use them accordingly. So listen double to what you speak. Yeah, just up the back. Oh, sorry, yeah, pardon me.
Yeah, I was just talking here and I will say something, talking work here, I will say something, and if it doesn't change the situation, then I just shut down and I go and do my own job.
Yeah, right.
So I get out of it because I don't deal with that very well, so I go quiet and they're like, oh, you all right? You're quiet. I'm like, you're not getting on with it, I've got to go do my job.
And there's two dynamics in play here, and they're natural dynamics. It's either we fire up or we withdraw. You know, if you take that to the extreme, you've heard of fight or flight. So when some of us get anxious or frustrated, we tend to raise our voice and go into that more aggressive fight stance, and then others of us are naturally going to more of that withdrawing flight. It's just a thing. Did you have something to say? Last one, and then we'll move on.
I end up, when things go wrong and you're like wondering why things are not working, I just end up justifying my actions. You just like find all the reasons why you're doing. You start justifying why you're doing it, not being like sensitive to why things are actually happening and why things are like falling like apart and stuff. So you just justify your actions, not being sensitive to everyone else.
So you're going into defence mode, right? Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much for sharing some great personal insights. And look, it's not often that we create a space to actually do that reflection. What is my part in it, rather than pointing the finger at everyone else. So look, let's start to go very quickly into some things that we can look at. If I did have a video, which is about 5 minutes, we might pass that one on, I think. And just come to Patrick Lencioni, who I mentioned at the start. So he wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And what he advocates is that there's 5 layers, and each of these layers builds on one another. And you'll see there, the number one is the absence of trust. So trust is foundational to a team working well. Would you agree with that? If you don't feel safe in that environment, if you don't feel as though your opinion is going to be heard, if you feel that you're going to be criticised, you'll tend to shut down. If you don't feel that we've got each other's back, then that layer of trust is not there. And if we haven't got trust, the second part of that says, is there a fear of conflict? So if we don't trust each other, if we know that we haven't got each other's back, we're not necessarily going to engage or challenge each other because it's not safe to do so. So there's no back and forth and healthy exchange of ideas and opinion. The next one, if we're not having that conflict or that exchange of opinions in a safe context, there's a lack of commitment. So we can't all get on the same page, and generally what will happen is you sit around in a group and someone, there'll be a few people that will speak up, and then the leader says, well, here's what I think. Thank you very much for that. This is our decision. Who's in agreement? And people go, yeah, I'm in agreement. There's no way I'm in agreement. Okay, and we become passive aggressive. So there's no unity, and there's a lack of commitment. avoidance of accountability. So if there's no commitment, we avoid accountability. There's no shared goals. We don't hold each other to account. And ultimately, there's an inattention to results. So we have mediocrity, we have self-interest, we have distractions, we have missed deadlines. So the most important part of that triangle is the foundation of trust. Do you agree with that? Yeah. I'm just interested if you have any reflections on what are a couple of things that can create trust as a foundation in a group, or something that you've done in the past or that you use that creates that trust amongst the members. Any comments? Yes, we've got one here.
Maybe doing, to develop trust, not coming to not using it, doing other activities where you can do group dynamics of togetherness before you come to a position where you have to make big decisions in a different position, in a different situation.
Thank you. Looking at ways that we can connect the group so that when conflict does occur, there is that foundation of trust and safety. Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the major things for me in creating trust, particularly in a group setting, is respect. Yep. Where you are willing to let someone else say their piece, and then you, if you're a leader, then you give them a chance to say what they think. And I think that creates a lot of trust in the group setting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. There's an exercise that we share with some leaders. It's called above and below the line behaviour. And this is something that can be applied in a work context or any group context. So when you first come together as a group, you sit around like us and you come up with some rules of engagement. So, you know, you draw a horizontal line. What are some above the line behaviours that are going to be a reference for how we behave as a group? And then what are some below the line behaviours that we as a group won't tolerate? And you have that listed, and it's a reference point for when conflict comes. It's just a simple little exercise, but really good one, setting the ground rules of engagement straight away. So thank you for that. Any other quick reflections on or practical ways that we can create trust as a foundation, just up the back?
Some years ago, I worked for a government department, and they took time out from work to have people come in, and the whole group would go out and have just an exercise. People would come in and go through different exercises that were to build group dynamics that had nothing to do with work. It was just getting to know people better and getting to get involved in situations where you had to rely on each other's decisions, and that was a way of building trust there too.
Yeah, terrific. So it's an intentional thing, isn't it? It just doesn't happen organically. There's got to be an intentionality around how to bond these people that have their worldviews, that have their biases, that have their schema, and aligning them to that common goal. That's the challenge. I feel I have great respect and empathy for leaders when I look at this stuff. What a challenging role. Even harder in a church context because we're dealing with a bunch of volunteers. So we don't have a stick that we can say, well, do what I say or else. They'll just go, oh, I'm out of here. So it's really challenging. Have some empathy for your church pastors in all of this. Someone else had a comment? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I've learned recently is like to be friendly and kind, and like you said, empathetic, because then we're building a sense of like relationship. And so when the time comes to like bring confrontational topics, it's not seen as an attack to them, but it's seen as like, oh, he actually cares for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I was struggling with, like confrontation. But that is like what I use now.
Right.
And they're like, oh no, this guy cares for me, so he's saying these things.
It's not what you say it, it's how you say it, right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
is what you're saying. Yeah, really good. I mean, we could do a workshop or two just on this and the next slide, but I'm going to start to wrap it up because it's hot and we've been sitting for a while. Just give you one more one more slide, getting into the science of motivation. And I love this because this provides a discussion around how do we create the conditions for people to thrive so that we actually get done what we need to. And this is based in science. So these guys, Ryan and Deci, did a meta-analysis of all the studies on motivation. And motivation is really complex, and there's spectrums of motivation and different reasons that we get motivated. But ideally what we want is to be intrinsically motivated, right, rather than extrinsically motivated. Extrinsic is about, well, if you do this, I'll give you that. Intrinsic motivation is more, I'll do this because I really feel passionate and I'm invested in this. So it's taking it from, do I have to do this, to, wow, I really want to do this, right? And this meta-analysis of all these studies came up with 3 basic human needs. So when you're leading a group of people, make sure, first and foremost, that you allow them some autonomy. So who hates being micromanaged, right? That's why people leave jobs. My boss is a jolly micromanager all over my shoulder. They tell me how to do it. Our natural inclination and desire is to have autonomy. Give me some freedom to get it done. And there's some interesting companies that are doing this at the moment. I think it's Atlassian. Have you heard of that? Atlassian. It started off about 12 years ago with a couple of Australian tech entrepreneurs. It's now a $2.5 billion global company. But they have what they call the FedEx Challenge. And of course it's a tech company, so they're always looking at how to innovate. But the FedEx Challenge, because it's an overnight challenge, right? So they say, I want you to go away tonight and I want you to come back with an idea to the team tomorrow that we can discuss. You look at companies like Google and they have 1 day a week, the 24 hours, where they say, right, I don't want you working on your normal programming. This is going to be a time just to brainstorm creative ideas, 1 day a week. Then we're going to come back and we talk about them. It's creating autonomy, and you look at the success of those companies, it makes sense. The other one is competence. If you're a leader, excuse me, you need to make sure that your people know what they have to do. You've got to make sure they're trained properly. There's nothing worse than being thrown into a situation and you go, I just don't know what to do. In the church work, we're notoriously bad at inducting people, inducting our leaders. You talk to our leaders and you say, well, you came into this role as conference secretary. What was your induction like? Oh, I was just basically handed the key to the door and best of luck, right? So in our leadership stuff at the moment, induction is a major focus. Some people are resourceful and they survive, but there's a whole lot of people that are never talked about that we lose that could have been, showed great potential. If they had had better support and induction and so forth, they would have been much more successful and stayed in that role and continued to make a big impact. So make sure your people know what they need to do, that they're trained properly, that you're investing in their development. And number 3, relatedness. Is there social support in my environment for doing it? So praise people, tell them when they're doing a good job. Even if they're not doing a good job, talk to them. Tell them in a practical, constructive way without a whole lot of feeling how they can improve. Help them set goals, develop those relationships. We spend about 70% of our time at work. So if we're not getting relatedness at work, which is a basic human need, then we're going to fall flat. So my question would be, normally if we had more time, what are some ways, if you're a leader or if you're part of a team and you can take this back to your leader, can you ensure that there is autonomy, that you know what you're doing, and that there's a social relatedness? What are some ways that you create that relatedness, that team dynamics, that connecting of people so that we can achieve our common goal? So, in wrapping up, that was a 1.5 minute video, but we'll skip that as well. That was just on humility. Summing it all up, it's been short and fast-paced. I hope you've taken a few sort of things away to think about. Team success factors for leaders. Be humble in the face of the challenge ahead. Admit that you don't have all the answers, but maintain a thirst for learning, right? I mean, in this day and age, we need to be constantly learning. things are just changing so quick. If you're not, as a leader, invested in developing yourself and those that you lead, you are not doing your job as a leader. Be curious about what others bring. Give people a voice. Ask for their opinion. Listen. It may not be the answer, it may not be the path you take, but give them a voice. Allow them to feel heard. Don't criticise. Say thank you for your idea and take it into consideration. The other one is work on the team, not in the team. So you look at Phil Jackson and some of these coaches, they're not actually in the team, are they? Their job, and your job as a leader, is to work on the dynamics of the team. Because often if a leader comes to a meeting and he says, right, here's what we want to solve, let's have your input. One person might say what they think. He said, well, here's what I think. What do you all think? And everyone goes, okay, well, if that's what you think, I'm not going to, all right, okay, yeah, don't really agree, but yeah, that's all right. So he's in the team, or she is in the team. You know, there's that power differential, so it's going to impact the team dynamic. So as a leader, your job is to work on the team to enable your people, to give them autonomy, competence and relatedness, and to create the conditions to get the best from your team. Have a clear direction, Phil. You mentioned that. A clear direction. Communicate that consistently. You can't over-communicate the direction and the vision. Have a set of behavioural expectations up front. Above the line behaviour, below the line behaviour. Here's 3 or 4 core values: integrity, respect, that are going to be a reference or a guide to how we behave as a team. Make sure your team's competent. Hold them to account. That means checking in with them regularly. Sometimes it may be about saying, hey, you're kind of on the wrong track here. I just want to talk to you about it. How can we reset? But hold them to account. And finally, look at ways that you can develop trust, provide autonomy, give praise and constructive feedback. I'm sorry we don't have more time. As I said, I hope that you've got some things to take away, and it's been a helpful discussion this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean, for that interactive session, and I hope you have all learnt some tips and some tools to take back to your workplaces and maybe to your board meetings and your business meetings. But if you've got to leave now, that's fine. You're welcome to stand up and go. But normally our format for these workshops is we allow for a bit of Q&A time at the end. And I know we were answering lots of questions along the way, but if anyone does have any general questions about the presentation this morning that you'd like to ask Dean, we'll get David walking around with the microphone. And if you could just put your hand up and we will try and address them for you now.
If people want, they can come and see me personally as well, if not everyone wants to stay. So don't feel as though you have to stay. The session's over. If you've got any questions, you can ask them, or now, or come and see me.
Yeah, 100%. So you can just put your hand up if you have a question. If not, then if you prefer a bit of a one-on-one chat with Dean, he'll make himself available afterwards. But otherwise, we'll bring that session to a close then. We hope that you enjoy your day, and we look forward to catching you all at 7 o'clock tonight for our worship program. God bless.